think we've got quite a few of you here, so I'll get started. Welcome everyone to our first webinar. This webinar is all about navigating the summer together and thinking about how we can support children and young people who might feel a bit anxious with the summer holidays. My name is Rebecca Kinnear. I'm the clinical lead here at Melios. I'm a CBT therapist by background, and I've worked with children, young people and families for a number of years now. Just a little bit about Melios. We are here to provide mental health services, autism and ADHD assessments. All of these are delivered online for children, young people and adults. And if you'd like any more information about that, our website is down there, and we will also be sending you some information after the webinar today. So as I mentioned, this is our first webinar of Melios Insights. We have got a couple of more webinars coming up later on in the month. One of those is for parents and carers, and one of those is for young people directly. As I said, we will be sending lots of information out after the webinar today, but you can also find all of that information on our social channels as well. All of our sessions are free to attend, and if you can't make it at the time, we will send some information to you afterwards with a recording as well. So we've got about half an hour today. I'm going to try my best to finish with a little bit of time towards the end so that we can answer any questions that you might have. There is a question and answer box down below, so please feel free to pop some questions in as we go through. So what I thought would be helpful for us to talk about today is a little bit about anxiety, why it behaves the way that it does, and then to think about, okay, what can we do to support young people to maybe reduce that anxiety a little bit and to feel good about the summer. So to give you some keys for success. And if I was you attending this webinar, I would want to walk away with a toolkit and things that you can do straight away. So I'm going to make sure that I give you as many of those strategies and things as I can. Okay, so to begin with, what is anxiety? It's basically a threat detection system. And when we feel anxious about things, it's not that there's anything wrong with us. It's sometimes that our system can be a little bit faulty. The calibration can be a little bit off. And it's important to remember that children's brains are still trying to figure it all out. So I can't see you, and I'm just going to hope that you play along with me on this one. But if you put your arm up like this for me, this is a really good way of understanding children's brains and how our brains develop. Okay, so this is the hand model, which was developed by Dr. Dan Siegel. And this part of your arm represents your brainstem. This is how we send messages from the brain around the body. And if you put your finger in like this, your thumb in, this part represents your amygdala. That's the part where fight, flight, flop and freeze tends to be. And if you fold your fingers over, this represents your prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that helps us to think about consequences, to plan, to regulate, and to stay calm. You can relax your arms. What's important to remember is that children's brains are still developing, and that prefrontal cortex, the bit that helps us to stop, to plan, to think about consequences, isn't fully developed until mid-20s. So when, as adults around children, we're asking them to behave in a certain way, or we're trying to encourage them to think about something in the future, it can help us to just stop and think. They're not mini adults. They still can't think in that way. And so it's our job to try and support them to learn and to develop. And it's helpful to remember that their system isn't broken. It's just perhaps a little bit overtuned. They are seeing things in a way that's causing them to think that there is danger around. And anxiety happens when we overestimate that danger and underestimate our ability to cope. So again, a way that we can support children and young people is to help them to build on those coping strategies and those coping abilities so that even if the thing feels really dangerous, they believe in their ability to cope and therefore their anxiety is reduced. So thinking about summer holidays in particular, obviously there's a change in structure. Those daily school habits have completely gone out of the window for many people, and that can feel really hard for both adults and children. We go from that very organized schedule to having whole weeks and an endless summer just free. And that can feel really, really disorientating, particularly for people with anxiety or who are neurodivergent. That predictability of routine can help to feel controlling and calming and help us to feel that there is some certainty about life. But on top of that, now we've got social media, and sometimes as adults, but also as young people, we just see this kind of perfect summer being presented to us. And that can lead to a feeling of pressure to keep up and to be having the best summer ever. And summer can lead us to wearing, lighter clothing, and that can lead to body image worries for some people. There's increased social pressure where we're at parties and barbecues or family visits, and that can be really, really exhausting, especially if we've lost the additional support of friends, teachers, school counsellors. But for some people, there isn't all of that busyness, and the summer can feel quite lonely and isolating. Coupling that with that unpredictability, maybe even a change of location if you're going on holiday somewhere, a change in sleep pattern if sleep routines have gone out of the window. All of these things can increase anxiety and can lead us to feel unsure, uncertain, and seeking control and familiarity. But it's important to remember that anxiety doesn't always look like fear. Sometimes it can show up as irritability and anger, as tiredness. Sometimes you might hear young people talking about feeling that they've got tummy ache or that they feel unwell, they have headaches. Sometimes it looks like withdrawal. And if we think about all the different ways that that can present, it might be physical and somatic. You might see more jaw clenching, nail biting. You might have your child saying that they feel really dizzy or that their heart's racing. They might have a change in their cognitive and emotional processing. They might start asking you for more reassurance than usual, asking the same question over and over again. Or they might be trying to ask you about what ifs. So they might be saying to you, what if this thing happens? What if we don't get there on time? What if I haven't remembered this, that, and the other? And as I mentioned, sometimes that leads to differences in their behavioural presentation. And very often that's the one that parents will see more easily. So you might see some clinginess, difficulties with separating. You might see them seeking that familiarity through trying to control things. They might be quite rigid about routine, or they might find themselves becoming anxious and having meltdowns when plans change. That isn't necessarily bad behaviour. That can be them trying to find that familiarity, trying to feel a sense of control. But you might also see them shutting down, as we mentioned. So now that we've got kind of a sense of what anxiety can look like, you'll probably be thinking, okay, what do I do? What do I do about this? So thinking across the age range, you've heard me say a couple of times now about control. And helping your child feel a sense of control can be really, really key in providing that stability and that calm. And that can look like offering them small choices. Would you like to do this or this? Do you want to have cereal or toast? Even those small things can help us to feel a sense of familiarity. Lots of people will talk about making time to get outside, and I know that that's an easy one to think about. and it's also an easy one to forget about. But we know that vitamin D helps with mood, as does movement, as does exercise. All of those things that help us to release those happy, good hormones will help to reduce anxiety and will help to upskill your child, building those confidence and competence skills. Another key thing is making the unfamiliar feel familiar. So perhaps if you're going somewhere new, you might decide to show them a video or photos of the place that they're going. You might talk through the journey with them step by step. Even small details can help the brain to feel more settled. Balance is key. And I think this is a tricky one for parents. You know, a lot of young people connect with their friends through gaming or social media or on their phones. And absolutely, we don't want to take that away. We want to ensure that they're still maintaining connections and social connections. But it's really important that that's balanced with in-person connections where possible, because we don't want children to lose their social skills. A really nice thing to do if your child is particularly anxious separating from you is to talk with them about how you'll think about them when you're apart. So you might be saying to them, I was at work today and I remembered this thing that you told me in the morning and it made me smile. You might decide to have transitional objects. Maybe you both have pebbles that you keep in your pockets and you can talk about whole routines like that can act like emotional grounding points and can really help children and young people feel thought about and held in mind, reducing that anxiety. And the thing I come back to time and time again is modeling. Whenever I'm working with families, I talk to parents about the importance of really sharing with our young people about our own emotional journey and, very importantly, how we cope. So, what I mean by that is knowing that it's okay to voice anxiety, to talk about worry, and to talk about how you overcame that and how you dealt with it. Children are really clever and they pick up on the things that we're talking about more than perhaps we might like to admit. So, using that as a way to teach them and model how we as adults have learned to overcome these things, again, is putting some of that stuff in the piggy bank to help them have the skills and strategies to believe in themselves and their ability to cope. A really good strategy for children who perhaps avoid something because of anxiety is to build a ladder to success. So, you've heard me talk a little bit about withdrawal and how sometimes young people who feel quite anxious can find themselves avoiding. And we know that avoidance doesn't help. When a young person or an adult avoids something that they find anxiety provoking, yes, they get an immediate wave of relief. And that relief is really powerfully reinforcing. And quite reinforcing for parents too, because we feel and we see the relief in the young person and we see them calming down. And I get it. Who wants to make their child feel anxious? That kind of goes against everything that we're taught to do, right? But when we do allow our young person to avoid things, every time that avoidance happens, the brain logs that as a lesson. It tells them that thing was really dangerous and escaping was the only thing that saved me. So, back to that anxiety equation where we're trying to build them up so that even if they think the thing is dangerous, they believe in their own skills. This is doing the opposite. And anxiety shrinks their world a little bit more each time. So, we call this accommodating, when we adjust our own behaviour to help the child avoid distress. And that can look like different things. That could be avoiding, but it could also be maybe ordering for them in a restaurant or in a shop, or doing things for them that they could try themselves. We know that this is one of the most evidence maintaining factors in childhood anxiety. And as I said, I understand it absolutely comes from a place of love. But there is an alternative. We can support our child to develop and to gradually expose themselves to the feared thing. So this is not about throwing them in at the deep end. It's that supported exposure in manageable steps so that their brain gets the new evidence. We're training them to be able to see, I did that scary thing and I coped with it. So the ladder of success is something that many parents think won't work. I've actually worked with a family very recently, and mum was very skeptical about this, but was amazed at how this one thing changed something that they'd been struggling with for months. You can see here that it talks you through kind of putting the most feared stimulus at the top. So this is a thing they find really, really difficult that they're working towards, goes at the top of the ladder. And at the bottom is something that they feel they could do with a little bit of support from you. We want to set them up for success. So we're starting with something that we know they can do. And what we do then is kind of build in each of the rungs of the ladder to help them to see where this is going. So it's really, really important that you draw this out. Top tip, I would always get the young person to draw it out so that they feel that ownership. Back to what I was saying about the control as well. And as you're doing that, you're going to be curious. You're going to ask them, how would it feel to do X, Y, and Z? You're going to coach them through this using emotional coaching. I wonder if that feels really hard because you're feeling anxious. Or I wonder how you're feeling about the fact that you managed to do that thing really, really well. Where possible, you could use rewards or incentives to help them to move through the ladder. Now, these don't have to be financial rewards. It could be things like staying up a little bit later, picking what movie the family watches, anything at all. But helping them to visualize this and move through the ladder at their own pace, seeing it in front of them gradually with tiny steps is really powerful. I also wanted to talk through a couple of things that you can do that are more specific for different age groups. So as I said at the beginning, I'm trying to give you as many strategies as possible here. Thinking about primary school age children, let's start at the very beginning. Name it to tame it. Let's give them a feelings vocabulary. You might say something like, hey, I can see that you're feeling some kind of way today. I'm wondering if you're feeling a bit nervous, or I'm wondering if you're feeling a bit sad. For young children, it can be quite good to externalize anxiety as a different character. What's that worry monster up to today? That helps to reduce shame, and it gives you that shared language. With younger children, body first strategies are a really great place to start. Talking about feelings with young children works less well than just trying to move through them. So you will have heard, I'm sure, about breathing exercises, and a sneaky way to bring in breathing exercises can be to blow bubbles together. Or you might have different sensory toys that they can play with in a calm down corner. You might also do things like animal walks, or going out and trying to find everything on your walk that's the colour blue, helping them to mindfully regulate. Timetables and predictability. So using a bit of predictability as an anxiety buffer. Visual timetables can really help, because very often it's anxiety that's the driver of anxiety rather than the activity itself. And using play as a form of micro exposure. So you can rehearse things together that they're worried about through maybe, I don't know, a stuffed animal learning to swim before the child does, and using social stories to talk through and help them to feel prepared and give them an opportunity to talk about any worries. We've spoken about setting up a shared language, but just to add to that it can be really useful to have a scale. So you might agree between you that 10 could represent feeling really anxious, 0 is not anxious at all, and you can do kind of quick shortcut check-ins before you do something new. Hey, I'm just checking in. How are you feeling today? What number would you rate your anxiety? Great way of checking that you're both on the same page. And worry time can be a time where you dedicate a period of time, 15, 20 minutes, 10 minutes, to talk about the worries together rather than letting anxiety come all through the day and take over the day. So this is about teaching them to be able to contain and delay worry rather than suppressing it, and bringing them to you so that you can coach them through. For older children, you want to shift a little bit more into collaborating. So this is not solving for them. This is asking them, okay, what do you think's going on here? What do you think might help? And even asking permission before you give your opinion. I have an idea. Is it okay if I share that with you? We're helping to build a sense of agency, and that in itself is protective against anxiety. I think a tricky one for secondary school age children is watching out for avoidance, because let's be honest, it can kind of look like normal teen behaviour. Staying in your room, not talking to family so much. So just checking out what's behind that avoidance so that you can try and pick out, is this anxiety driven or is this something else? At this age, you can also start to teach them some CBT informed strategies. So you could teach them about thought challenging, which is where we're looking for evidence against and for a thought, rather than just accepting a thought as fact. And all of this is about fostering independence. I would also say at this age, try and protect the relationship. If it gets to the point where you're battling something out and you're arguing against something, go with the relationship where you can. That might mean conceding, it might mean compromising. Where it's appropriate, I would recommend do that, because the relationship is going to be your vehicle for change and the thing that means that you can keep talking and having these conversations. And problem solving skills, great opportunity at this age to teach them how to solve problems. So working through each of the different possibilities to deal with a problem, listing the pros and cons, and then trying to look at which feels like the most useful step forward, planning how to do that, coming back and reviewing. Very often we miss the review step, but that's the bit that consolidates the learning for them. So whistle-stop tour of lots of strategies. There might, of course, be times where you might need extra support. So some anxiety, as I said, is developmentally normal and expected. And that kind of anxiety will often respond well to some of the strategies we've mentioned there. But if you are noticing that anxiety is severely limiting your child's function, if they are eating less or eating a lot more, their sleep's disturbed, they're not leaving the house very often, and they are more withdrawn, or if you're noticing more physical symptoms where there isn't any medical reasoning for this, or if you're noticing signs of self-harm or signs that your child is saying they don't want to be here anymore, we would always recommend that you seek support for those kinds of things. And your GP is a great first port of call for those. Obviously, when schools return, your school pastoral team will also be able to refer into local CAM services as appropriate. And if you are worried about a child being able to keep themselves safe, or you being able to keep them safe, as well as your GP, you can obviously access emergency services where necessary. And we, as I mentioned, provide a range of different services and support for children, young people and adults, as well as single session consultations for parents and carers. So if you'd like to know more, please do get in touch with us. Wrapping up, if you take one thing away from this, it's that your calm presence is more powerful than any technique that I have just listed. And it's not that you have to make anxiety disappear this summer at all. It's about supporting your child to practice, building their confidence, and helping to cheerlead them on. Now, I wouldn't be a very good CBT therapist if I didn't try and set you some homework. So, I'm going to ask you to consider some of the strategies that I've mentioned just now and commit to trying to give one a go. So, just take a second to think about those and think about what might work best for your child and how you might introduce that strategy to them. I will now hand over to see if there are any questions, Faye.
That's perfect. Thank you, Rebecca. That was really insightful and useful presentation. So we've had a couple of questions come through during the session. So the first one was, are there things parents shouldn't do when a child is experiencing anxiety?
Good question. I would say it's finding that real balance. So, not kind of leaning in too much, not panicking, but also not dismissing the anxiety. So, responding in a way that is curious, non judgmental, trying to find out a little bit more about what's going on for that young person, and then perhaps coming to some of those strategies and working through those with them. Um, I think as well, trying not to turn it into something that it isn't. So it could be that that young person's anxiety, nerves are completely appropriate. And so that's a really good opportunity to validate and to say to the young person, yeah, I can see why you feel nervous about this thing. I think I would too. Why don't we think together about how we can approach this?
That's perfect. Thank you. And then we've had another one. So it says, my 15-year-old is really anxious around other people, especially in shops or talking to people they don't know. They've said they want to be able to talk to people more. How can I help?
Really good question. So I would say a lot of the strategies that I've mentioned around kind of being curious and collaborating with them, finding out what it is that they want to achieve. So can they think about a particular situation that they'd like to be able to do, a particular goal, and then maybe trying to work through the ladder with them. So thinking, for example, being able to go and pay for something in a shop and then thinking with them about how you would do that. Is it that they come in with you first of all and watch you pay for something in the shop? Is it then that they go in first and they pick up the thing and take it to the till whilst you're in the background, and kind of moving gradually towards them being able to do whatever it is themselves? I think would be kind of the first thing that comes to mind with that.
That's perfect. Thank you. So that's all the questions we've had, and I think that's all that we have time for anyway. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. If anything comes to mind afterwards, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the Melios team. As this is our first webinar, we would really appreciate your feedback. So we'll be sending out a feedback form with the follow-up email, and we'd be really grateful if you could just spend a couple of minutes to let us know what you thought about this webinar. But thank you again for joining, and thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.